We got to have a firsthand look at Michigan players doing the NIL thing. There's a new period in practice, which very well could pay off, and there has been some recruiting news on this Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Friday. We are back and doing it. This is going to be one of two on Friday because we didn't get a chance to do everything we wanted to do this week, and there's a lot to talk about. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. I was on the ground on Wednesday. Yesterday was a recovery day. The plan was to come to you and be like, let's do this. If you didn't know, air is really bad outside. And Sarah and I were out in the bad air for an entire day. So, as were Michigan football players. So we're gonna talk a little bit about getting to be on the ground for an NIL experience. Because Sarah and I partook in that as Michigan players shot with Wolverine Boot Company, and that was awesome. We'll get to the Beat Georgia drill that has been implemented. We'll talk a little bit about Ryan Mallett, who sadly passed away earlier this week. And I mean, that one hits home pretty hard. And then we're going to get into a little bit of recruiting. And the second show we're going to do today, because I really could just do one show today, but I'm going to do two today because I want to do my little best guest list kind of thing on a whole separate episode. So we will do that here in a moment, but let's hit right into this Wolverine Boot Company shoot that I was invited to, and then naturally invited my lady to come with me. I had Sarah come, and this is her second time getting to be a part of the world. I think it's hilarious because she doesn't know, like, she knows a couple people, right? Like, I know some of you saw the picture of her and Chris Jenkins making the rounds, which is weird to me because she posted it and whatever. But that was her favorite player just because she liked the picture she took of him when she went to Hawaii. But it was funny to me introducing her to people like Blake Corum, and it's like, oh, what do you do? And it's like, he's just the best running back in the country. What's a running back? It's a lot of fun. But it was really cool to be on the ground and to participate with these guys as they as they did some stuff for Wolverine Boot Company. I'm not going to go too deep because they're going to have the whole reveal, the whole release, and everything. And basically, the only reason why you would know about it is if you're following Valiant on social media, or because they did a couple little behind the scenes pics and stuff like that. So it's going to be really cool. But what I just thought was cool is just seeing the fact that these guys are able to profit off of their name, image, likeness. And I think that they're just perfect shoe-ins for it too, right? Like, they were, I mean, honestly, a couple of those guys could be, if football doesn't work out for them, they could be professional models. That's where they're at. They some of them didn't even take to it very easily, right? You could tell there's some uncomfortability. But they just took right to it. Now, if you're wondering what my role was, Sarah and I took pictures. So I can't wait for you to see those whenever those drop because the guys looked incredible. But it was just a really cool event. There was some other stuff that happened in it. There was a giving back component to it. I'll leave all of that again for Wolverine. They've already had a little bit of a connection. You know, Blake Corum had an ad last year. Then there was the event in Bay City earlier this year in the spring, in April, I believe it was. Because it was right after I hurt my back because I was supposed to go to it and I couldn't because I had hurt my back. But I know a lot of you are always hearing about my various injuries. But I have various injuries. I hurt myself a lot. It sucks. But nonetheless, it was just a cool thing to see that, and also just to meet Scott Schossel, who's the VP of marketing with Wolverine. He's a Buckeye, or he's living in Buckeye country. He's living in Columbus, but a big Michigan fan, listener of this show. So shout out to Scott. It's just a very cool thing to be around the guys, be around a bunch of like-minded people, and to see NIL being done the way it's supposed to be. The good news is we're also learned some things coming out of it. I'll share a couple quick things. They're nothing that's a huge deal. Blake Corum's running. He feels better than ever. That's good news. Very good news. And it was embarrassing for me because I hurt my knee earlier in the morning by bending down to pet Zuri. He's going around doing his normal stuff. I'm wearing a knee brace because I bent over to pet my dog. Chris Jenkins is up to 310 pounds, open to be 315. It's incredible because you look at him and he is svelte. Like, there's no body fat on the guy. If you were to just like sit there and say, how much do you think that guy weighs? You'd probably say like 250 max, right? But 310. He played at 285 last year. He's going to make a difference, right? He is going to make a big difference. So I'm excited to see what he is able to do this year, and honestly, just to look at some of these guys, they're just in insane shape. And it's, Junior Colson, you can see his muscles through a coat. Like, I know I've seen Junior like 3 times this summer, so that's not necessarily something new for to really notice, but it's pretty incredible the type of shape that he's in, and really the shape that all of these guys are in. Benjamin Hall, again, like those legs, man, they're huge, and he's super humble. I'm excited to see how this guy plays, right? Because I mean, he's got the humility. It's an interesting balance between humility and cockiness, which is what you need with a football team, right? You don't want everyone to be just super humble. You want guys to have an edge, and that's what these guys have. But ultimately, it was just a really cool experience. I know this isn't probably the most exciting topic to lead off the show with, but I think it's a worthwhile one because it's seeing NIL, which Michigan, that's been the big criticism for the last 2 years, something that I've kind of ignored on this program. It's showing that in action. And then it's also just seeing that, hey, this is how it works. This is how it can benefit. And I think that what Wolverine boot company is doing is incredible. Their products are amazing. It made me want all of them after seeing them. I'm an impressionable youth at 41 years of age, but it made me want all of the Wolverine boots, all of them. So very cool, very excited. Yeah, it'll be cool to see this ad campaign come to fruition once it fully does. Again, thanks to Scott Schosel and for putting this on. Thanks to Valiant, and plenty more stuff coming. We got an autograph. I know that that was mentioned on On3, Tom Brady's NFT company. That's another thing that's going to be coming out, and we're just going to start seeing more of these things rolling, and it looks like more and more going to be involved on my end potentially. So hopefully we'll bring you more info about NIL in action, and we'll try to find a cooler way to address it as we go forward. All right, we're going to get to the Beat Georgia drill and my eulogy for Ryan Mallett momentarily before we get into some recruiting stuff. I do have a note I'm going to drop in the next podcast, but I'll drop it at the end of this one too. You can read into it what you want. It involves Aaron Scott. He announced his commitment day. Yeah, it doesn't look like it bodes great, but I do have a note to drop, and we'll get to that here in a moment. Before we do, baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to join today. One of the things that I love about FanDuel is the app is super easy to use. You can make your bets super quickly and you get paid instantly. That's the most important thing. So don't miss your chance to snag a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball trademarks used with permission. All right, before we get to the Beat Georgia drill, I think I want to start off with the Ryan Mallett eulogy. I don't know that I have a ton to say, but it hits close to home. If you don't know about my history, and for all of those who used to get really upset when I'd wear like an Oklahoma hoodie or a Georgia sweatshirt, I went to Michigan. I mean, I was born at the University of Michigan Hospital. My grandfather, who was my hero, my idol, if you're watching on video, this tattoo on my wrist here is a tribute to him. He went to Michigan, as he told me once. When we were in 2009, we were watching the game at the Michigan State game at South, which was a bar in Santa Monica, California. He said to me, "You know, when I went to Michigan, Fritz Chrysler was the head coach." And it's like, don't tell people that. But Michigan runs deep in my blood. I started at Michigan in 1999. I dropped out in 2000, came back in 2004, and graduated in 2008. So I've had only a couple quarterbacks in my tenure, Tom Brady and Drew Henson. I didn't really even know who Drew Henson was. I didn't want to see him out there. I was a Tom Brady guy all the way, not because I was prescient, but because I was ignorant, to be honest. And then obviously Chad Henne, except for Chad Henne had injuries in his senior year, which means that we saw a lot of Ryan Mallett. So the only year that I bought season tickets as a student was 2007. And I didn't go to all of the games, but I went to most of them there. I missed a few. I missed the first two, App State and Oregon. So you can blame me for not being there. And I believe, I can't remember the other one I missed. Minnesota. No, I was at Minnesota. I actually worked for ESPN. That was my first sports job for that game. There was another game I missed. I can't remember. One other home game because I was in Pennsylvania. But otherwise, obviously I got to see Ryan Mallett in person. He and Chad Henne were my quarterbacks. So to hear at the age of 35 that he drowned in Florida is shocking and disheartening. And I know he didn't leave Michigan on the happiest of terms with the turnover with Rich Rodriguez, but obviously that's irrelevant when it comes to news like this. And he had just taken over a high school program, White Pines or White Bluff, something like that in Arkansas. And I was excited to see what he was going to be able to do there. So it really sucks to hear that he his life was cut short. 35 is far too young to pass away. Just tells you that the water is brutal. It doesn't matter how athletic you are or how good of a swimmer you are, or what happens. There's been different information on whether or not he was carried out by a riptide. He was supposedly swimming to a sandbar and passed away, but he obviously had a really good career after he left Michigan. Without him, I don't know what Michigan would have done. I mean, Michigan went 8-4 in the regular season, 9-4 the overall. Obviously, Henne was the bowl game quarterback, but I don't know how well that season goes without Ryan Mallett being able to step in as a true freshman, a former 5-star. And certainly, we all have really good memories of him. Particularly, I just think about the duel between him and Jimmy Clausen, and then the Notre Dame game and the Penn State game as well. And it's just really sad and disheartening to hear. So my condolences to his family and any of his former teammates, whether they be from Michigan or Arkansas. It's just a really terrible situation. I know we're about a week late almost here because that happened early in the week, but it's really sad. So had to say some words. On a more positive note, and speaking of SEC things, it was revealed via Bruce Feldman that he was speaking on a podcast saying that Michigan has now instituted a Beat Georgia drill, which certainly has gotten a lot of mixed reviews, right? It has the mixed reviews because there's people like, oh, they should have a Beat TCU drill first. and all of that. Listen, it's not a great situation that Michigan lost to TCU. And certainly I think there was an element of Michigan overlooking them. But you look at the Michigan instituted a beat Ohio drill in 2021. That's the type of thing that I have been clamoring for forever, right? It was 9-on-7 drill that finally helped the team overcome a lot of their shortcomings against the Buckeyes. Honestly, also just having it being a daily focus. That's something that Michigan was missing. Last year, the mantra, I believe there was a beat state drill last year. I might be speaking out of turn here. I'm pretty sure there was. Because the whole idea this last year was we want to continue to beat Ohio State, but we want to beat all of the state schools. Beat Ohio State, beat Michigan State, beat Penn State. Worked. They went undefeated in the regular season for the first time since 1997. So that worked. I think being able to sit and identify what a team does well, Ohio State in its passing game, obviously the run game tends to work for them as well. Being able to defeat that defensively and find offensively, they haven't really generally had issues playing against Ohio State, right? Even in those blowout games, 39 points in 2018, 27 in 2019. So that they haven't really necessarily struggled to score against Ohio State as much as they've struggled to stop them. I think with Georgia, it takes a different type of focus, right? Because now you have to be able to score against their defense as well as face an offense that honestly has a lot of similarities to your own. But what's also important is it gets you ready mentally. So I know there's going to be a lot of derision from going up against a team, or not going up against a team like Georgia, but having only faced Georgia once in the however long, and you sit there and say, well, you didn't get to face them last year, but it's better to be prepared than not, right? I mean, Georgia is considered to be that team. Clearly, Michigan thinks it's that team. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that, and I think it's better to be prepared. And you know what? People can deride what Michigan's doing. It wouldn't be the first time. And certainly a lot of the times when Michigan's derided for things, it's things that have worked out in Michigan's favor, right? People like to talk about Jim Harbaugh climbing trees and having sleepovers. Guess what? Every single recruit that he who he went and did a sleepover with, except for one, ended up committing to Michigan. So is that really a bad thing? So it's good to see that Michigan is being forward thinking and that Jim Harbaugh is still pushing forward. I have a note on that I want to get to in the next segment as we hit on a couple quick recruiting notes. But because I do have a couple quick ones that we want to hit, but I do want to have another point. So we're going to do that here in just a moment. All right, before we get to the couple of recruiting things, I talked briefly. No, it wasn't that brief, but I talked to my best friend on the phone earlier today, and he had said, like, you know, I didn't want to believe it a couple years ago, but maybe Jim Harbaugh really was on that Dabo Swinney track. Remember, it took Dabo, I believe, 7 years to get to the playoff, 8 years to win it all for the first time. Jim Harbaugh was entering year 9. Obviously, there's a COVID year in there, so you kind of, in a way, take that out. But so it's obviously a little bit longer. But one of the reasons why I'm beyond cautiously optimistic about Michigan's trajectory beyond even this year is these last 2 years is the first time that we have finally seen what has long been thought of as a Jim Harbaugh team. Right? That hasn't really been what we've seen. 2015 was very makeshift. 2016, you had the defense. You didn't really have the offense. Offense was very complicated, but you didn't have that quarterback that was an Andrew Luck or Colin Kaepernick caliber type guy. And Wilton Spate, no offense to him, he's a buddy of mine. I love Wilton. I will defend him to the death, basically. But he still wasn't that caliber of a quarterback. He was very, very good. A lot better than people give him credit for. Michigan didn't have as good as Devion Smith was a lot of the time, as well as Chris Evans and Ty Isaac. He did not have the same caliber types of backs as what he had in the early going as he had at Stanford. Obviously, none of those are Frank Gore. Didn't have the offensive line play. Certainly. Because Stanford, you thought of them as being these bullying offensive lines. He didn't have those. Finally, starting in 2018, he started having those lines, but then the defense fell off. Because one thing that you knew that Jim Harbaugh was going to have, weirdly, if you recall that article, here's what to expect from your Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh was going to have a really dominant defense. Unfortunately, by the time that the offensive line started getting figured out, happened to be the same year that Indiana and then Ohio State figured out, oh, right, if you just throw not screens, but slants, do quick underneath throws, Michigan can't defend it. So the defense fell apart. So they just didn't have everything going all at once. And now finally we see that the offensive line, the running back, the enigmatic quarterback, and the defense. And I'm not saying, I mean, obviously that's the whole team. Every team, it's like you want to be like, yeah, they need all of the sum of all parts. It's the style, though, the bullying style. There's a reason why it's ridiculous that MSU fans like to try to hold their heads up high because they had a first quarter lead at one point against Michigan last year. Guess who had a halftime lead against Michigan last year? Rutgers. How did that work out? It doesn't really matter. You're gonna, Penn State had a second half lead, but then got bullied because that's the style of Jim Harbaugh football. You're going to keep it close for a little while, and then eventually you're going to tap out. We started seeing that in 2018 until really the Indiana and Ohio State games, and then it just kind of fell apart. So I think that's an important note to make. All right, I've got a couple recruiting notes to get to here. They're small, but we're going to do these two notes and then one kind of inside info-ish thing, which I take it for what it's worth, a grain of salt, whatever. But well, let's start off with that. Let's not bury the lead. Let's not make that the literal last thing. So I will say, based off of speaking with one of the players, I won't single out who. They were told directly by Aaron Scott that he said he's committing to Michigan. Now, the reason why that's obviously sounds like great news, right? Like, yeah, all right, he's coming. But he has since visited Ohio State, weighed his options, and decided to commit on his dad's birthday. So whether or not that holds true, we won't know until he makes that decision. We'll know a little something maybe if he visits Ann Arbor for the barbecue at the Big House. That'd be a pretty good sign. Maybe he doesn't fully have, he might have set a date. He doesn't necessarily mean he knows for sure what he's going to do. That has been a thing before. We've seen that. Guys, I mean, heck, even on signing day, Rashawn Gary, I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, he was leaning heavily towards Michigan. Clemson made him think with a little bit of incentive, if you know what I mean. So that's that. Take it for what it's worth. Doesn't mean that he's coming. It's another good sign that at least at one point, it is believed that Aaron Scott was like, I'm all in. We'll see how all in he is. We'll get more into that in the recruiting episode. But the other things that are worth noting, Jeremiah Beasley commits. That's a win over Michigan State. It's amazing for the sake that Michigan State thought they had him in the bag a long time ago. I don't even think that everyone deleted their crystal ball picks that had them in back in like September or whatever. Let's see if I can pull it up real fast because I think that's worth looking at now that I'm just kind of thinking here. But we can find out very quickly. No, all 8 predictions ended up being for Michigan, but the Michigan State people came along late. We committed on the 28th. You had the Michigan State contingent. Now, Sean Shear, who I worked with at 24/7, he put his prediction in for Michigan in late April, but Justin Thind and Stephen Brooks, they didn't get to it until, and Corey Robinson, they didn't get to it until either Tuesday or in Stephen Brooks's case, Wednesday. They were like, oh, he's still state. Okay. Anyhow, that's big for Michigan to get a 4-star out of Belleville linebacker. What's I think bigger, even though he's a guy that can come in and make a difference. Like we've talked about, Michigan needs high-profile linebackers. I don't know that he's quite that caliber, right? Aaron Childs should have been that guy. But to get a guy that's at least a 4-star linebacker, that's key. But being at Belleville, being a teammate of Bryce Underwood, and being a guy, he told Bryce Marich at the commitment, I believe it was Bryce, hey, I'm going to recruit. All right, there's one guy you need to recruit more than anybody, and he happens to play for your high school team. That's Bryce Underwood. Also of note that we need to definitely talk about is the ESPN rankings. Lots of guys dropped. Jaden Davis basically across the board is not a 5-star anymore. That's kind of to be expected if you would have been kind of paying attention with the Elite 11, a bunch of other stuff. It's kind of disappointing. But you know what? That's getting a high 4-star guy, a guy who was considered a 5-star. I mean, it's not dissimilar. I mean, JJ McCarthy finished a 5-star on both metrics, but some dropped him to a 4-star, right? It's Michigan's got multiple guys here. Let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 guys in the ESPN 300 right now, with more coming. That's impressive. Brady Prieskorn is now your top-rated guy at number 83. But what's really interesting is Jaden Smith is number 102. Why is that so interesting? Well, Jaden Smith, at the time that he committed, was only ranked by On3 as a 3-star. Now, ESPN is the only one that has him as a 4-star, although that does make him a 4-star in the 24/7 Sports Composite. I mean, he went from being a guy who didn't even have a star ranking to being 102 overall. Michigan, I think, maybe found a diamond in the rough in him. So here's what Tom Luginbill and Craig Aubert said about him. A standout at UC reports Carolina camp. He posted strong testing numbers, including a laser 4.58 40-yard dash and a broad jump over 10 feet that would have placed him among the top linebackers in this year's NFL Combine. So again, this is a linebacker. He needs to continue to fill out that 6'3", 200-pound frame, but while adding more power to his game, he can give offenses fits and with his quickness and range. He'll effortlessly slip blockers and change direction, has excellent body control, disruptive defender who lives in opponents' backfields. Smith should only continue to improve as he adds size and gets stronger. Won't be surprising to see him move up the rankings further when all is said and done. Huge. It was obvious that he just wasn't evaluated before, and now guys are getting to see him and are like, okay, like what we see. Good deal. So, would like to see more risers here. Out of all of the 11, let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them are in the 200 to 300 range. Only one now is in the top 100. It doesn't necessarily matter for Michigan per se, but you want to see Michigan still get the better of guys in rankings, and they still very well could. We'll talk more about recruiting in the other episode, which these are being posted concurrently, so check that out when you get a chance, the recruiting episode. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you again extremely soon. Peace.